I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going with this because it's faithful to the spirit of the play. And I think that it's kind of the same answer to Oxfordians. Oxfordians are the people who push the theory, which came out about 250 years after Shakespeare's death, that he was not there was no Shakespeare, that he was not responsible for his own plays, or that his plays were written by a committee, and that it was either Francis Bacon or Edmund de Vere or any of these people. But the problem is that most of the time, and I'm not knocking people who say that, because I've looked into it for a long time, and at one point I was very much one of these people. But one of the problems is that this functions not only as a kind of weird meta snobby psyop, but also as a diversion for people who haven't read the plays. And one thing that's clear when you read any work of literature, especially when you read a lot, is the voice of the artist. This can be in painting or in music or in literature. It's in any work. And the difference is that, you can see similarities, for instance, between Marlowe and Shakespeare, but that's because Shakespeare took a lot from Marlowe. They were exact contemporaries before Marlowe was probably killed in a tavern brawl by one of Francis Walsingham's agents. But his mentality and his voice is completely different from Shakespeare. Edmund de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, also has a completely different voice in terms of his writing than Shakespeare does. He was not even a mid-level poet who died 10 years before Shakespeare stopped writing plays. And we have extant verses from these people. Same with Bacon. One of the things about Bacon is that when poetry functions as a cipher for an interior language within the poem, it denies the essence of what poetry is, which is that poetry is not a cipher or a puzzle to be solved. It's not a riddle. It's the best words in the best order, and there's an ethereal beauty that shimmers from the page. And you can see this, you see this in terms of, if you want to talk about code language, you see this in Shakespeare with various words and phrases that he uses throughout his plays. And the problem with writing in a committee is that look at works written by a committee. The only good things that are written by a committee or a body of workers, like a writer's room, is like sitcoms. And they are as silly and usually they don't penetrate into the depths, but that's okay. That's what they're meant to do. They're meant to be kind of superficial. So, with Francis Bacon also wrote, and the difference between Bacon and Shakespeare is that Shakespeare was not a philosopher. He's a poet. So his philosophy comes through in terms of his poetic exegesis. It's not a philosophical text. There's a lyrical quality. There's a lyrical content. And to say that characters were, writing because they didn't want to be identified is kind of silly, because we have those people writing anyway. And what's the other one? This all stems, the Oxfordian theory stems from the fact that people can't believe that Shakespeare could write the things that he did because he couldn't have possibly gone to these places because he didn't go to college. Well, so what? We see now the complete culmination of that. I mean, do you think now that you need to go to college to write something beautiful or to create something? Obviously not. Why is it any different? Just to think that you need to go places to see them for yourself rather than in your imagination, because the plays are all imaginative. They transcend the visual places. Romeo and Juliet transcends Padua, right, and Verona. It transcends those places. They exist in our minds as archetypes for the spirit and for how we live and how we think about love. We don't need to see the stone buildings. You can read about them, right? If someone describes, Ireland, yes, it helps to see things in the first place, but it's, Shakespeare had an excellent classical education at Henry VIII school. His father was the mayor of the town. He later became a stockholder in his company. So, I don't know. And it's ironic because people say we know nothing about Shakespeare, and in a sense, they're right. We don't know, but that's the strength of Shakespeare, that we don't know about his personal beliefs because he lives through the characters that he creates. So it's important to be faithful to the text because in the end, I don't even care. I just read the text and I get what the characters say in the play and what's on the page. We don't have to know anything about him. But we actually do know more. We do know more about Shakespeare than most people of that age. I mean, there's no proof that Shakespeare went to that grammar school. I mean, but there's no proof that, there's no proof that I went to school. I mean, another one is that he wrote his signature a bunch of different ways. Well, there are 0 extant copies of Shakespeare's signature, first of all. There are 0. There are none. Do you think that there's going to be copies of your signature in 500 years? That's kind of a silly argument, I know, but it still holds true. There won't be. There won't be any examples. And by the way, my signature looks different every time I write it, and you can't tell the letters that I'm writing. It looks like squiggle. So it's also based on kind of a silly argument. Now, I'm giving kind of a sort of a glib answer to those questions, but that's really about all I care to give on those. But anyway, I mean, who knows? It could be right. It could be right. Maybe there was no guy. I don't know. Maybe it was another guy. But I don't think so. I don't think so because I have the text in front of me and I'm reading the text. So that's all I got.